Okay.
Dear guests, esteemed panelists, Your Excellencies, my name is Tali Jordanova. I'm the CEO of the Global Citizen Forum, and it is my great pleasure to host all of you here today. For those of you who are attending a GCF event for the first time, the Global Citizen Forum is a Canadian non-profit, non-partisan organization committed to bridging dialogue with action on issues related to global citizenship. We host a series of high-level discussions on governance, mobility, migration, sustainability, and culture. We also support a number of grassroots organizations committed to issues related to the refugee crisis, girls' education, women empowerment, and others. The Global Citizen Forum is a membership-based organization, and we invite all of you that are interested to learn more at our website at globalcitizenforum.org. We're thrilled to have such an incredible panel of speakers and are so eager to offer a rare and truly unique combination of views for today's discussion. Starting from the government perspective, from the Honorable Gaston Browne, Prime Minister of Antigua and Barbuda and frequent speaker at the GCF. From the business mogul, global entrepreneur, philanthropist, and a real global citizen, Paul DeJoria. From an organization that has been helping people to explore the depths of oceans, mysteries, and beauties, Dr. Drew Richardson, President and CEO of PADI Worldwide. From marine scientist, explorer, and environmental entrepreneur, member of the GCF and co-host of today's session, Dr. Deborah Brosnan. Special thank you for organizing this together with us. And last but certainly not least, from the founder of Arton Capital, the Passport Index, and the Global Citizen Forum, Armand Arton. The topic today is oceans. The water that connects us, that defines us, that composes each of us as individuals, as nations, continents, but so much more than this. It is what gives us life. Our oceans support and sustain every living species on the planet. They form 70% of Earth's territory, and they are under tremendous pressure. The climate crisis is pushing our oceans and biodiversity to the edge, with entire ecosystems on the verge of extinction. Global citizenship has a huge role to play in the effort to combat climate change, to protect our oceans, and prevent catastrophic displacement waves around the globe. Today's conversation will be focused around this, and we'll look at the initiatives that various stakeholders can take on and make a difference today. The event will start with a fireside chat between Dr. Brosnan and Mr. DeJoria, and will then continue by inviting the rest of the panelists for a roundtable discussion. The conversation will be kindly moderated by Dr. Brosnan, and without further ado, Dr. Deborah Brosnan, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tamil, and thank you to everybody who's here from around the world. We know we have people from many countries listening in and joining us, as well as to our wonderful esteemed panelists. Thank you to the Global Citizen Forum for co-hosting this with us. If you haven't visited their website or not familiar with what they do, they are an amazing organization, and I think you gave just a snapshot of some of the great work you're doing. My name is Deborah Brosnan. I am the scientist, and I'm the founder of Deborah Brosnan and Associates. We are a group that work to bring together science, business, governance, community, philanthropy to solve environmental challenges. It's a very messy place to be, particularly now, because these interests are not always aligned or always communicating. And yet we find ourselves at the center of issues whereby bringing people together with respect and good dialogue, we find that we can create great solutions. So it is a particular pleasure for me to be here today and to welcome all of you on this idea of global dialogue, global action for the ocean. Our focus is global citizenship for the ocean. We are all aware of the challenges facing the ocean, whether it is climate change, sea level rise, loss of coral reefs, loss of fisheries, loss of artisan fisheries, human trafficking, the refugee crisis. We all know the problems. What we want to focus on today is what can we do that is different? What can we do that is better in order to turn the tide for the oceans and for the people that depend on the oceans? Tell you've already gone through the structure of this format, so I would like to kick it off initially with a brief fireside chat with Paul DeJoria. Paul, as many of you know, is a global entrepreneur, a businessman, a philanthropist who has been for many, many years a leader in this field. I'm going to ask all of you if you would mute your video while Paul and I just chat for 10 minutes so we can get a better forum here. Paul, it is my pleasure to introduce you as an entrepreneur, philanthropist, and also supporter of many great projects. You have an extraordinary story. You started in LA effectively in poverty, spent time in a foster home, lived in your car for a while, and yet rose to be this force for good in the world, major businessman, major entrepreneur. Your story is documented in the documentary Good Fortunes and in a wonderful interview you did recently with Lewis Howes that I would recommend people to do. But in short, if I look back through your life, particularly your early life, there wasn't much in there that would have said, this man is going to become a major leader for the environment. Somewhere along that journey, you made the choice to care. You made the choice to take action. So what is it that makes you care, and why should we care? Why should companies care?
I think I can go back to some of my youthful experiences that really made an impact. When I was very, very young, actually my whole life here, we had a deadbeat dad. So it was just my mother, my brother, and I. And we grew up in downtown LA. We were considered to be underprivileged children, and we were members of the Variety Boys Club. Now, we supposedly underprivileged children every year got to go for about 5 days to a national park and go out camping. And they told us about trees, about pine cones, about, just all kinds of really cool things. So we thought nature was the greatest thing. When we got back to the city, we had a tree in our neighborhood. And there wasn't a lot of trees in downtown LA, but we had a tree. And our little gang, we were just a bunch of little kids there. We had a gang around the tree. We would hang out. And nobody was allowed to carve their initials in the tree. We were so excited when we get out of town, go up there and feel nature, that we thought that was really special. They would also take us out on a little fishing trip. Oh my God, the ocean was full. We would throw a line in and catch a fish within a matter of minutes. This was really great. So I kind of grew up knowing that nature is a more special thing than the actual city itself. And going out there was very, very exciting. Well, one thing led to another and another and another and another. At that very young age, my mom also taught my brother and I to give back no matter how much you have to make things better for the environment or the people. As a very young boy at 6 years old, she had my brother and I put a dime in a man ringing a bell who had a great big bucket in front of him. And this was at Christmas time. We thought, well, okay, Mom, why are we giving this man a dime? Because in my day, 10 cents would buy 2 big soda pops or 3 candy bars. And Mom said to us, boys, we could only afford a dime this year. But that's the Salvation Army. And they do things for people that have no homes and no food. Remember in your whole life, son, as you grow up, whatever you could do, no matter what you have or what you don't have, always give a little bit to somebody else. It's kind of like paying rent for being on this planet that God created for us all. I thought, wow, that kind of makes sense. It stuck with me.
I love that idea of that concept of paying rent, that we don't actually own this planet. We're paying rent on it. We spend time on it for ourselves and for future generations. Let me ask you, for you yourself as an individual, and also given your global entrepreneurship, what specific actions are you taking, and would you recommend for other people? People are listening in here from very different fields. There are business people listening in, there are NGOs listening in.
Sure.
What actions are you taking, and what would you advise them?
Great. I'd say, first of all, dialogue on what's going on. If people don't talk about it, they don't pay attention to it. The press is a great example, whether it's false press or good press, that's a great example. And we're just disseminate the information on how important this is. Now, a lot of people say, well, the masses are handling it. Why should I get involved? Let me give you an example of why you should get involved. When you get involved, you change things for the world. One of the many things I'm involved with, for example, is the Sea Shepherd. I've been with them for about 30 years supporting them, sending ships out to sea to defend the waterways, and more important, to defend the species in the water, whether it's whales, whether it's dolphins, whether it's shark, a variety of things, or those endangered species. People that go out to do something to make a change. A dear friend of mine headed up an organization called Waterkeeper Alliance, Bobby Kennedy. And it was like, wow, this is something. We're cleaning up the waterways of the world. Roger Daltrey, my buddy, said it the best. He said, JP, I'm going to bring my team over and play a concert to help you guys raise money. And by the way, it's Roger Daltrey of The Who. He says, when the waterways go and the oceans go, the world is going to go. Well, the more we find out about how everything is depending on the ocean, and as the oceans go, and as you look outside now, if you're in the water, okay, there aren't many fish there. There aren't many fish at all. We're being overfished. Well, at the same time, well, where does it start? How are we overfished? How do we bring it back? Many species depend on coral reefs to exist. They're also extremely beautiful. So at our company, we feel that everybody has got to kind of pitch in here. So what do? We make it available to our whole team. About 2 years ago, I came into the office, flew in from Texas to the LA office. And I said, guys, where's everybody? There's only 3 people here. Where's everybody? They said they're down at Santa Monica Beach, cleaning up the beach. In other words, our philosophy at Paul Mitchell Hair Care has been take care of the planet and the people first, profit second. And anything you could do to assist, we're going to give you the time off or the money to do it. On their own, they put their own team together and did it. Now, what does this do for a company and its environment? If a company does this, it's a greater good for the greatest number. Their staff members say, this is really cool. We're involved with a company that really cares outside of making money, making the planet a good place to live. And we could go home and tell our children and friends, we cleaned up the beach, we planted trees, we went down there and took garbage off the seashore because there was a lot of plastic coming up there. We did something. It keeps you unified. How does this work? John Paul Mitchell Systems is 41 years old. We're in 107 countries throughout the world. Our turnover, businessmen, our turnover in the last 41 years is less than 200 people. Now that's pretty good. Why do they stick around? Obviously a good environment, but part of it is they let themselves participate because they want to in various things we do to change the environment for the entire planet. And they're happy about it. It's a good idea about it. And by the way, guys, if we don't do it, who in the world's going to do it? We got to do it. We got to take that step forward. The masses are made up of individuals. Individuals are pretty powerful. Spread the word and get involved. You don't have to give money. Take your time and get involved. Do something to make this planet a better place to live. You owe it to the planet.
Thank you, John Paul. I think that's really inspiring. And the message I take away from that is how, as a business person in your business life, you are empowering your employees, saying, you go and do it, we'll support you, and giving them the opportunity to decide what to do and then to take action and do it. And I think that really brings home to people that they are in charge of their planet, they're in charge of the actions they take. It's a wonderful story, and and congratulations, 41 years of doing this. It's amazing. Thank you. I'm going to jump a little bit because you and I have been working on a project, and in a way it's spawned a little bit by a statistic that Silicon Valley's Tom Chi gave me recently. He said, Deborah, we are losing 1.2 hectares of reef every minute. Now that's about 3 American football fields. We're losing that every minute. And it's taking, with our current technology and our current efforts, 10 years to replace 1 hectare. So we're losing 3 a minute. It's taking 10 years to replace those 3. That is an equation that's taking us in the wrong direction. And you and I have talked about this and said we've got to start responding. We've got to start responding to scale. We put a man on the moon, surely we can fix the coral reefs. And I think this project that we're about to launch really goes a long way to this. And thanks to your vision, John Paul. So maybe you could talk a little bit about it, our Coral Reef Ocean Shot.
You betcha. Ocean Shot is a fabulous product. Everything was put together beautifully. We have a country, Antigua and Barbuda, and a prime minister that wants to make the world a better place to live. And why not start with our own country here? It's a beautiful environment. We're doing a project down there, but to do the project, as Deborah well knows, Deborah was hired to make sure we did nothing that would hurt the environment. Everything we must do must keep the environment better off. We must have more turtles coming back than there were before. We must bring all these things back. We must protect wetlands, and we must, more importantly, protect that ocean. And right in front of these projects and around all these islands here, you have reefs that are disappearing. Around our world, they're disappearing. Those reefs are the starting point for many species to eat off the reefs, and then something else comes along and eats them, eats them, eats them. In other words, it's an entire line of feeding. So it was a perfect environment. We had the top environmentalist there, obviously Deborah, who's a superstar, by the way. And she said, yes, I'll take on this project. And then as we talked, we said, why don't we do something that'll be an example for the world? Why don't we take Antigua and Barbuda, and we have a country of people that are behind this, and actually make changes? Now, the people, once they found out on Barbuda what we were doing, were very excited. About a month ago, I was there and spoke to approximately 80 people that live on the island of Barbuda and are working people there. They're working for our project as starters. And I asked them, what do you think about what we're doing now? We want to save the ocean. Here's how we're doing. We want to save reefs. Here's how we're doing it. We want to do this ecologically inclined. What do you think of this? Their answer was, this is wonderful. People talk about it. Nobody ever does it. So it goes back to what we're doing and how we can disseminate this. We are doing it. We've provided the money for it. We've provided the talent for it. And it's the most perfect environment. Now, we're not all experts. However, what we found out is a lot of the local people that aren't college graduates want to get involved. They say, teach us, train me how to do it. They're open. So they may not be specialists, but under the guidance of Dr. Deborah Brosnan and others, we're going to show them how to maintain it. Not just how we're rebuilding this reef. We're going to create a reef there. We're going to rebuild a reef there, a beautiful reef, at least a couple of acres or hectares. We're going to rebuild it. They want to be part of it. They want to learn how to do it so they continue to do it on their own and show their children how we care about the future, not just about things right now. A lot of people think, well, what's going to benefit me right now? And forget about the future. Whether you have children or no children, the fact that something much mightier than us created this planet. We sure as all heck didn't do it. However it was created, it was something very powerful. Well, isn't that the image of whoever created something powerful, to let their children want to continue to create something powerful? And if something has been misaligned along the way or destroyed, isn't it our obligation to say, yes, it's my obligation. I want to play my part in changing the world. That's going to be a little godly thing I want to contribute to. And by the way, when you give to somebody else, especially a planet that can't talk to you, but it talks to you in beauty, and you ask absolutely nothing in return, but you know you're doing something, it's the greatest high you'll ever have in the world. And that's what we teach our children, and that's what the people of Barbuda feel too.
Great, thank you, John Paul. And I'm really excited that we're working on this project. And to your point, without reefs, we don't exist. Protect nature, nature protects us. And that is our goal, to recreate the architecture, recreate the life that small fish feeds a big fish, feeds a human being, feeds a family, provides an economy. And to your other point, we actually started this project by bringing in some local people who have a little bit of training and are training them further. As I speak, I want to give a shout out to Raleo Camacho and Rishma Mansingh, two Antiguan and Barbudans who are in the field, doing the kind of work, putting out the data loggers, actually in the ground, doing the kind of work that will make this possible. And as you know, we're talking with some Silicon Valley and high tech to start to bring in technologies that we don't even know what they are yet, that will really help us accelerate this and be able to translate it. So to me, this is terribly exciting. I'm very pleased to be proud of it. Thank you very much, John Paul, for your leadership and support of it. And I know that this is going to transform not just Antigua Barbuda, but beyond. It's where we want to go. I would like to, this is a very good opportunity, I think, given that we've just been talking about the partnerships and what we can do collectively that we can't do alone, to ask everybody else around this panel to join us. We brought together, as you can see, a wonderful panel, Armand, Drew, Honorable Gaston, Browne. Why did we bring this group together? For two reasons. First of all, each of you come from a different background. You influence policy, you influence business, you influence philanthropy around the world. Your decisions matter. They have consequences for millions of people. And so taking action is very important, and the action you take does matter. Secondly, it's really unusual to have a group like this from such diverse backgrounds sitting around the table together and talking, and including science. Often science is in the other room, but science has a major role to play. So we brought this group together. But beyond that, I want to point out that we are joined by hundreds of people from around the world. Nigeria, Kenya, Bulgaria, Ireland, US, Canada, UK, Mexico, Montenegro, that's just a few. We have 21 of the 24 time zones around the world represented here right now. Now, if that isn't truly global citizenship for the ocean, what is? It shows us that people care, that they've shown up, and that they really want to do something. And that is the most important thing that we can do, all of us collectively. Here we are, 21 time zones, looking at this ocean. What can we do to help solve that issue? So with that in mind, I want to turn first to Armand Arton. Armand is a global businessman, entrepreneur. He is the founder and president of the Global Citizen Forum. And first, thank you, Armand, for co-hosting this with us. In your TED presentation, you talked about how you made a choice to move, to be an immigrant, to move to another country. But prior to that, your own family had to move, not by choice, but by external circumstances. And if we are to look at our communities now, particularly coastal communities, those that are feeling the effects of sea level rise and climate change, we are looking at people who do have to move or may have to move. It could be as much as 10% of the world's population, which is a lot of people in the world that may move as a result of climate change. That is a global issue, it's a global challenge. And so for you, let me ask you, what is it that in your history, obviously you were influenced by this having to move, that caused you to think about global citizenship? And what does global citizenship for the ocean mean to you? And how are you implementing it?
Thank you. Thank you, Deborah. And thank you, John Paul, for the lovely introduction of your project and the passion that you both of you care about it. And we hope to share it with the rest of the participants and beyond. Behind every story of businessman, there is a personal story. And a little bit like John Paul, my parents also come from unprivileged background, and we were migrants. We chose to come to Canada, but my grandparents had to run from refugees from Turkey to Bulgaria 2 generations before. So the force of moving to a new location and adapting yourself is a capacity that I believe is in each one of us. And when we talk about global citizenship, it drives our business. It is the mission of, and the core mission of my company. It is to share the responsibility and interconnectivity that we all are related. And what better example than the water, connecting us all. I'm a passionate diver, so when you talk about corals, is something I have seen for the last 15 years from the Gulf countries to the Maldives, with the bleaching, and it's something that I wish my kids will be able to see and their kids in the next generation. But the way our society evolves, that is a risk, and it is an unknown future. At the Global Citizen Forum, we care a lot about taking challenges that are beyond borders and nationalities and regions. And in that context, I believe that governments, private sector, science, leaders, we all have a responsibility from a macro level to each and one of us as individuals. What do we do? What can we do? Is it money? Is it power? Is it laws? Is it spreading a message? We all have to do something, and you can't save, everything. You have to pick some missions that are really close to your heart, that you believe in it, and focus on them and make a difference. I believe that that is a value for us, for our society, for our kids, and for all global citizens, is to understand that every action, being that in a personal life or in a business decision, have an impact on somebody somewhere else around this world. And even if you don't see it, it's your choice of trying to, put your hand in the sand, but everything we do is interconnected. And I think even the pandemic has showed this interconnectivity of the world we live in, and even more the importance of acting together. So again, with Prime Minister Browne, we have a leader who is extremely proactive, who takes actions, not only words, and putting in place legislations, allowing businesses to make a difference. I think we're privileged to be in this group, and I hope that we can take our action beyond this panel into the real life and change, even it's a success story for Barbuda that can be duplicated around the world.
Great, thank you. I think that is very much our goal too. And I do feel this concept of water uniting us is extremely important. I come from Ireland, the west of Ireland, and before there were trains and planes, there was a whole community that was connected by the ocean. From the west of Ireland down to Spain, down to Portugal, down to North Africa, up to Northern Europe, called the Lusitanian community. And they were a real community connected by ocean, now in different countries. So it was wonderful. Honourable Gaston Browne, Honourable Prime Minister, you come from an island community too, and a small community on a fairly small island, and yet you now have risen to be on a global stage. You were one of two leaders invited by President Biden to the recent climate summit. You chair the Alliance of Small Island States. But importantly, Antigua and Barbuda, your country is representative of the challenges facing small island states around the world, particularly in the tropics. And the people you represent every day feel the effects of climate change and the challenge of what's happening in our oceans. So to you, what does global citizenship for the oceans mean, and what kind of actions are you taking and will take?
Thank you very much, Deborah. And let me just commend the panelists. Certainly a very impressive group of participants, individuals involved in science, in business, in philanthropy, government, and community. As you're aware, climate change remains the most significant existential threat to our common humanity and our one planet. We only have one planet in which to live. So as global citizens, we have an obligation to work in global solidarity to protect our one planet against the effects of climate change, which has impacted heavily on our oceans. And, we here in the Caribbean, even though our emissions are negligible, and even other small island states globally, even though our emissions are negligible, we tend to suffer disproportionately from the effects of climate change. And certainly our oceans, which is extremely important to sustain human civilization, has not been spared the effects of climate change. We all know that the ocean has provided jobs, provided food. It has sequestered more carbon than is sequestered by the Earth's atmosphere, at least 50 times more. And it certainly produces more oxygen, or perhaps most of the oxygen that we consume. So our oceans are very important, but I sense that the importance of our oceans are perhaps taken for granted. And as a consequence, human activities would have literally undermined the health of our oceans and would have resulted in the depletion of oceanic resources. We know, for example, that overfishing and marine pollution, especially with plastics, even ocean acidification from emissions from the particulate matters of various large emitters, that those would have literally, let's say, undermined the health of our oceans, which are so important to human civilization. And as a consequence of our own actions, you would have seen, or we would have experienced an increase in global emissions over the years. And that in itself would have resulted in global warming and sea level rise. And evidently, global warming would have resulted in more frequent and more powerful storms. I would have seen what happened within the 2017 hurricane season, in which many of our citizens and residents in Barbuda were literally displaced as a result of the consequences of Hurricane Irma. In fact, in Dominica as well, our neighboring island, at least 3,000 Dominicans literally had to take up temporary residency in Antigua and Barbuda. So in essence, they were literally climate refugees who were displaced by Hurricane Maria. So we have lived the effects of climate change. And we know that with sea level rise, that coastal communities have been put at risk. We have seen the destruction of our coral reefs that would have resulted in more than 50% loss. And clearly, our coastal communities are now more susceptible to storm surges. So there are significant risk for food security, risk in terms of climate refugees, and even internally displaced persons, because as a consequence of Hurricane Irma, we had to remove all of the inhabitants of Barbuda over to Antigua. So in essence, they became internally displaced persons for a while. So these are the type of disruptions that we have seen in human civilization as a result of the effects of climate change. So I'm certainly very happy that we have this Ocean Shot program in which John Paul, yourself, Deborah, and others literally assisting us in restoring 2.5 acres of coral reef using climate resilient corals. And clearly, there are many benefits there, not only the recreational aspects, but in terms of bringing the biodiversity into balance is very important. And as you indicated, this project is replicatable, and we hope to see, especially throughout the Caribbean region, considering our vulnerabilities, that we could see more of these coral reef restoration projects. So this initiative in itself, I believe, will assist the Caribbean region and other small island states as we seek to have a more healthy marine ecosystem so that we can continue to sustain marine life and to exploit all of the resources and all of the opportunities associated with the oceans. And again, I think it's important, though, that there be a sustaining partnership between philanthropy, government, community, science. And as you know, Deborah, we would have brought the University of the West Indies Five Islands campus, which is domiciled here in Antigua, to the table, so that they too can play their part in this very important area of coral reef restoration. And as you know too, Antigua and Barbuda has been at the forefront of climate change advocacy, pushing the large emitters to include China and the United States to reduce their emissions, because ultimately it is their profligate use of fossil fuels that continue to undermine the climate and resulting in the ocean acidification, bleaching of our coral reefs, and the ultimate destruction of those reefs, literally putting our lives and livelihoods at risk. So we've seen movement. We'd have seen within the last several years that many countries would have signed the Paris Accord, including the United States. Unfortunately, they exited, but the good news is that they're now back into the
yes. US is back and back to business. Yes, great.
And we're very happy that they continue to participate and to provide global leadership. And as you know, here in terms of our own interventions, we have banned the use of plastics and styrofoams. We even hosted an international concert in conjunction with the United Nations, the Blow It Out concert, to bring awareness to plastic pollution globally. So we have been literally leading from the front, and we have been literally transitioning into green energy applications to make sure that we reduce our reliance on fossil fuel energy. And we are totally committed to our environmental obligations and to provide global leadership on this very significant issue that is affecting us, because we recognize too that ultimately the oceans will provide us with the opportunity and the resources to sustain human civilization. I mean, we do not have enough land available to, we will not have enough land available to sustain human population perhaps 30 years from now. And therefore, we have to pay more attention to our oceans and to ensure that we can harvest on a sustainable basis oceanic resources, and perhaps to even grow more food using the oceans so that we can sustain human civilization.
I think that is, thank you so much, Prime Minister Browne. I think that's a very compelling vision for the island, and also what we need to do. And I'll probably come back to some of this in a moment, because I think you raised an important point about really the islands are a microcosm of what's happening in the globe, and including for internally displaced people. A report recently came out of London showing that somewhere between, I think it was 55 or 58 million people were internally displaced last year. 98% of those as a result of extreme weather events, many of which we know are related to climate change. So the connection between humans, human security, and our oceans is strong, and I believe getting stronger, and we need to address it. So thank you for raising that really important point. Drew Richardson, you and I know each other for a number of years. We are fellow board members of a nonprofit organization, now PADI Project Aware. aware foundation that supports divers around the globe in protecting marine species and in cleanups, underwater cleanups, dive against debris. But you're also the CEO of PADI. And PADI is operational, I think, in 138 countries around the world. You've trained more than 26 million people to dive since 1967. And clearly, both personally and professionally, your world is strongly tied to the ocean. So what does global citizenship mean to you personally, professionally, and what kind of actions do you take and are you taking and will you take to promote global citizenship?
Well, thanks, Deborah. And it's an honor to be on this esteemed panel. A lot of the comments that have been made are clearly kinship from a global citizen science point of view. I think everyone here sees a sense of responsibility and maybe wishes to be good ancestors with the choices and decisions that we can influence. So I find that inspiring, and the PADI organization, which is in 180 countries across the planet, has the capacity to connect the dots, which I'll explain here in a few minutes, with a willing and interested audience that on a local and international level want to make a difference and reverse some of the trends that we're all familiar with. If you look at those trends as a big lump of clay, maybe you can get kind of depressed if you give up, but we believe in future hope. And if you hang on to hope, then good things can happen in terms of the art of the possible. And every speaker so far has spoken about the art of the possible. And you can take that clay and you can either trip over it like a stumbling block, or you can build stepping stones for that ancestry concept. So that's what we're on about now. And we came to that point really in our 50th anniversary, or what do we want to do with the next 50 years in the underwater space and the ocean, and really the aquatic realm of the planet has been a blessing for every diver and anybody that's ever engaged and taken a peek below the surface of the water. So we dedicated across the world to concept of pillars of change. What can we do to engage people and hearten people through partnerships to make a difference? And those reflect core values. They happen to be brand values here, but I think they're personal and values with everybody who's spoken and anyone who's listening, I think, to this panel today. And their commitments about bettering the people and the planet relationship, balancing humanity in the ocean. And they include ocean conservation for sure, through empowerment of communities locally to take conservation actions, whether people are at home or people are in transit, that roll up into a global impact collectively. And that starts with 28 million souls and that we can reach out to, and much more in terms of PR and media reach. And then taking responsibility for ourselves. The PADI family, if you will, have about 6,600 dive centers and resorts. We look at them as mission hubs. They're spread across those 182 countries. They have jobs for local people. They provide jobs for instructors. They invite local diving. They also invite diving tourism and exploration. And so thinking about the concept of sustainability, what can those visiting divers and those in situ sites do to reduce a global footprint and be responsible citizens of the planet? And so things like offsets and replantations and so on are on the agenda for regenerative tourism versus just sustainable. So the concept of the project that you're speaking about here with the 2 hectares is about regeneration. And I think that's the future. We think that's the future. And that all ties into another one of our pillars, which is just people and humanity, trying to strike a better balance with our relationships and interrelationships with the ocean, fostering diversity and inclusion. One of the really powerful things about engaging with the ocean is it crosses borders, cultures, demographics. It's not political. It's a diaspora of like-minded individuals who see things in sight and in mind. So there's a lot of seafaring folks that have never taken a peek under the surface of the planet. And when you do, you can see shifting baselines if you've been at it for a while, but it's still magical for people who are just engaging for the first time now, and all of them care about what's the end result. So to try to put that into something tangible rather than just feel good, coming up with a blueprint for ocean action, if you will, and their commitments on coral reefs and engaging with you in this good project, on marine protected areas, about climate change and offsetting with replantations and marine debris. And we're partnering to rid the oceans of plastic, which sounds impossible. But when you think about the art of the possible and you think about scale, through proper partnering, we can reverse that, remove it, maybe upsource it, upcycle it into useful products and remove it from the ocean and out of the food web. And we're doing that through the concept of our overarching mission, which is to create 1 billion torchbearers who are advocates for these ideals. 1 billion is a lot of millions. But if you think about people that are proximate to the sea or dependent on the sea, whatever walk of life that may be, 1 billion is the art of the possible. And if you had 1 billion like-minded people who are making informed choices on policy or personal consumption or travel or tourism, you can in fact make a difference. And we feel that obligation in terms of being good ancestors to do just that and look at hopeful messages going forward. So this conservation mission is the art of the possible, but it's a lot of work, but it's about connecting people to that ideal, to one another, and into action. And it's the heart of how we look at the planet. And as we do that, we welcome partnerships in new and different ways that are scalable. And promoting that concept of global citizenship is just what we do every day because we are so diverse and so globally dispersed. And that's attracted partnerships who recognize that we can get things done on the ground in our own small way through our mission hubs with people who care, who will volunteer their time and efforts to try to make that different as part of this torchbearer community. And the torchbearer thing, just as an aside, if you're familiar with our logo, which has been around for a while, there's a humanoid figure with a torch in their hand, which was inspired by the Jacques Cousteau films in the 50s. It was a French diver who was descending with a lighted torch. And we thought, it's staring us in the face. Our legacy and our future is staring us in our face. That humanoid figure with the torch will become the torchbearer, a responsibility, a commitment, and an ethos, if you will, to try to make a difference across the planet and strike that lump of clay, if you will, into stepping stones through action. So the diving community are critical stakeholders. It's insight and in mind. They're interested in taking coastal community action and really even in actions wherever there's a watershed that will roll into the ocean. We see that's attracting newer generations as well. And a lot of people are becoming more reflective in terms of legacy that have been at it for a while. So the question is, how do we do that effectively? How do we do that through partnering? How can we scale this in the months and years ahead against a time clock which seems to be imminent, seems to be highly pressurized? So that's really how we're looking at it at this point in time. We recruit about 1 million to 1.5 million new enthusiasts every year through our infrastructure. And we're finding that they're drawn in part to the fact of they can do something to make a difference rather than just read about it or see a depressing video, because you can get really depressed about the weight of this thing, or you can get inspired. So what you're doing there locally with this Ocean Shot coral project is inspiring, and we can replicate that. We can help people train to replicate that. It will create a model for the planet that finally has enough substance. So many good projects, they're fragmented, and then we can perhaps see this through across the planet through the infrastructure and partnering as I've just described. So
Great.
we're excited. Yeah, we're excited.
Thank you, Drew. We're very excited to and to be working with you. And I really do very much like this idea that you brought out about scale. 1 billion. 1 billion. There are 1 billion people out there who love the ocean more, and there are 1 billion people out there who are looking to know what to do. And I think this offers, I mean, there's many things to do, but I think it offers something to do that is scalable. And I think that's critical.
Well, you know, Deborah, if I look at it like this simply, like, unless you hate the ocean, why wouldn't you want to help her? You know, like this kind of that simple. So, and it's that complex. Yeah. So most people love the ocean.
Yeah, and I think we all learned, all of us here and everybody around the world, our connection to nature during this pandemic. Because where did we go? We went as soon as we could out to nature. We went to the ocean, we went to into the forest. We heard birdsong. People heard birdsong they hadn't heard for years. And I think it reminded us that we are that deeply connected, and particularly to the sea. And I'm going to use that the pandemic actually to ask each of you a specific question. And this is an action-oriented question. In the last year, all of us have come through the pandemic. We've had to make decisions. We've had to take action for our businesses. We've had to take action in our personal lives. We've had to weather a major global crisis. Science, I am happy to say, and very impressed with science. Science and scientists within a year came up with at least five viable vaccines that are helping us fight the pandemic. But all of us had to take action. All of us had to change. Science could help us. Basically, we could mobilize. We could mobilize on a global scale, but every one of us took action. Based on the last year, what lessons could each of you bring to the people listening here, to our audience who are participating, and to everybody else? What are the key things that we could take away from the last year that we can apply to global citizenship for the ocean? What key things can we do? Maybe John Paul, I can ask you to answer this, put you on the hot seat.
You betcha, that's okay. There are boots out there to be filled. During this pandemic, there were boots to be filled. How do we protect our people? How do we do this? How do we do that? Then we come up with solutions. But very few people, unless there's a catastrophe like a pandemic, want to fill those boots. We have a chance now to fill those boots and do something before the disaster takes place. By just knowing what's going on and participating in any way you can, you're successful. Success unshared is failure. This message, for example, we're going to get out to millions of hairstylists and students throughout the world. In fact, we actually have over 100 schools nationwide in the United States and a couple other countries, Paul Mitchell schools, that every year the curriculum is helping raise money and awareness to change the world. They raise over $2 million a year. We don't gain the money. We underwrite it all. It goes out to change the world. So we have learned that we can do things right now if we focus in on it, like the pandemic, to change the world now. But now we can do it before the catastrophe hits. And I must say that Barbuda, Antigua is going to be a good template for the world. And come, we'd like to share it. Success unshared is failure.
Yeah, great. That is a great inspiring message. I like the idea of boots to be filled. We know there's boots to be filled. Let's go, let's do it. And you're already starting it. You're already doing it. Let's expand it. Honorable Prime Minister, what are the takeaway lessons for you? You had to navigate an entire nation and still are. And
the pandemic, in essence, would have resulted in an increase in global solidarity. It would have demonstrated our common humanity, our interconnectedness, and the fact that we share common vulnerabilities. In fact, as a result of that, we'd have seen greater collaboration globally. And as a result of that, there would have been an increase in the effectiveness and certainly the efficiency in the production of a vaccine within a year. And I think those are important lessons for us to take away, to understand that we do not live independently of each other, that we live on a common planet with a common humanity, and that we are all interconnected. We are as vulnerable as the most vulnerable person on the planet, because the reality is with COVID, if we do not achieve global herd immunity, then all of us will remain vulnerable and susceptible to the effects of the virus. So I think it has literally provided some level of humility among our human beings, among human beings, so that we can understand that at the end of the day, we have to work with each other, because we are literally interconnected.
I think that's a very powerful and very strong message. And I think it applies to what we're doing here too with Ocean Shot, is that none of us can save the oceans on our own. And we're going to need the help, support of all of our citizens, from a diversity of backgrounds, a diversity of opinions, people we may not agree with, but fundamentally we all depend on that same ocean, that same world, and we've got to come together with respect. I mean,
so efficacious and effective solutions require global cooperation, global solidarity.
Yes, yeah, very well said. Armand, for you, having, I worked through this last year, both in business, the Global Citizen Forum, philanthropy. What would be the takeaway messages for
We're in the business of mobility. So it was a very interesting year where the world stand still, where borders were closed and passports were not used and airlines were grounded. It did create a very interesting phenomenon. People realized not to take for granted mobility and things that they used to do very easily. Um, and mobility has always been a dream from east to west and south to north, and from countries less developed. People with passports that couldn't travel needed a visa, but during the pandemic, Americans realized they couldn't travel to Europe. Europeans couldn't travel to Canada, to US. So the realization of what you take for granted is something that I hope is going to be like a ring bell for many other issues like the oceans. Unfortunately, you see, mobility was affected because of the crisis. Climate change, as we know, is very popular because we see the ice melting, because forest devastation is something that is in front of our eyes. The ocean is not something we see every day. And we need to bring through PADI and through the eyes of divers and technology and movies and social media, what's going on under the water. Because I believe that only when people are against the wall, they do act. Very few people like Jean-Paul and others have the vision and the capacity of acting before a crisis. The masses need a crisis. So let's hope that we're not going to get there, but that's what the pandemic of the COVID has realized, is that when we need to, we can get united, and that is the hope. Let's hope we can get united before a crisis now.
Yes, and I think your message and John Paul's resonated quite well on the need to take action before the crisis, but in the crisis we can do it. But we are in a crisis. So it's a matter of really getting people mobilized and working together. And working together, I think, is key. Drew, for you this last year.
Well, I would say, thanks, Deborah. I would say survival is the first thing for everybody. My estimation is people have become more introspective and searching for meaning in life. What does life mean? You mentioned songbirds. It's funny you say that. If I go out on the road, that's my wheelhouse now. I'm hearing all kinds of birds singing, chirping. It reminds you the sun comes up every day, with or without us, and the birds in spring is emerging in Northern Hemisphere. That's all hope. So as people look for meaning and introspection of the future, of how they want to live their lives, they're connecting more. So technologies help that, I would say, in a new and great way. People might be a little burned out on Zoom calls and miss the social interactions, which, maybe I'm just broadcasting for myself, but I'm a people person. So, but it's a great substitute for the time being to connect in new and different ways on messaging. And what I'm finding is pandemic has been a level set for a lot of people in an uneven playing field. I mean, it's but it's a level set. It's attacked every person on the planet in some way, shape, or form. Every country, every city, every bureau. So when have we ever had that? And then I look at the concept of 100 years ago or 102 years ago, our ancestors had this global Spanish flu pandemic, or whatever you'd like to call it. After that, that pent up demand to try to do something different with their lives turned into the Roaring 20s. And you can argue whether that was a good or a bad thing, but it was a hopeful resurgence. If we can help direct that same resurgence on the backside of this for the betterment of planet, balance of humanity and the ocean through our deeds, actions, and decisions, then we've made a good contribution. And I think the world is probably more ready for that. At least that's my observation. Borders are still closed in so many places and the local people are suffering, but there's hope rising in those situations. I can see friends and colleagues in places, Costa Rica, other places, who have turned zero tourism into trying to help local people stay in jobs by doing environmental deeds, exchange for food and so on. And they're getting funding for that, or they're using their own savings. So it brings out the brilliance in humanity. And I think that maybe the world needed that, and it needs a lot more of it, I think. But we're on the right track. So what are we going to do with this situation? Is this an inflection for our Roaring 20s for the ocean as humanity becomes more self-reflective? And I think we've had a lot of time to think about that. And, we're on the cusp of examples such as this project that I think will give people hope. And how can they help that, either with boots on the ground or in kind, or at least tell the story? And so that's the connectivity is really maybe the biggest asset that's come out of this.
Yeah, I really like that, and I agree with you. I do like the idea of the Roaring Twenties for the oceans, because I wasn't there, but apparently it was a great time, you know. So,
Well, you're Irish.
we continue the tradition. But no, I think that taking that energy, which is obviously there and pent up, and really bringing it out to the future. We're coming to a close, and I have one quick question that I'd like to ask each of you, 1 or 2 sentences. So really, which is, you've just heard us, John Paul and I have talked about Ocean Shot, what it is, what we hope to do with it. We've really talked about how positive we feel about the ocean, what we want to do. But more importantly, we brought together a group of people who don't normally get in the room together, certainly to talk about what to do and at this level. So from this forum, what's your next action? What is it that either excites you about the project that you will do, or what will you do next? John Paul, I'll start with you again.
Okay, well, needless to say, this has been a great presentation of different thoughts and ideas, all for the betterment of mankind and everybody. I'm going to take this and share it with millions of people, millions of hairstylists throughout the world through my Paul Mitchell company. And once people know about things, they can take action. We are taking action. What we're doing is real. It's not talk. We put the money there. It's actually happening. So what we're doing is happening. We're letting the world know it's happening. We're not talking about it. We're doing something about it. Here's an example. See what these fine, distinguished people have to say about it, and join on board and spread the word. In fact, spread this video.
Great, thank you. And you reminded me, you're absolutely right. As we're speaking, this project is happening. Yep. It's underway. Yeah, thank you. Honorable Prime Minister.
Right, but, you know, Deborah, let me thank you once again, yourself, John Paul, and of course, Armand, for putting together this very important forum. For me, it is such an important discussion about maintaining healthy oceans that, you know, I personally will commit myself to increasing my advocacy on protecting our oceans. And of course, insofar as the local project is concerned, the Coral Reef Restoration Project, I'll be holding both yourself and John Paul responsible to ensure that that project is implemented in a most efficacious manner. So again, I think it's a great discussion, and I'm hoping too that all of us will continue to be advocates for healthy oceans and the wider climate change issues, to make sure that we continue to advocate for more responsible fishing for large countries in particular, or all countries for that matter, to commit to reducing their emissions so that we can protect our planet, protect our oceans, and at the same time to ensure the sustainability of humanity.
Great. I really love this advocacy and accountability. I think these are wonderful. You're advocate, John Paul, you and I are apparently accountable. It's a nice division. But I think that's really important, and accountability is key, that we actually do what we say, not just on this project, but I think everywhere. Armand.
Thank you. I believe in the power of partnerships, and I think we have a great example here where society, private and government can get together and make a difference. Without the money of the corporations, governments wouldn't be able to execute it, but without the laws and the permissions needed, wouldn't be a success. So again, I look forward to have the success story of Antigua duplicated around the world in many countries. And as a conclusion, I would say that I would love to take this panel into our first Global Citizen Forum in December, in person in Dubai, with the Expo, where the world will be watching. As you know, 199 countries will be represented, and we can discuss this topic, and by then showcase some of your success already in place, and talk about sustainable tourism, where Global Citizen Forum is partnering with Expo, and really show these two countries where, as you know, land reclamation is one of the biggest problems for the Gulf countries, for the Maldives, for unsustainable tourism, and would be great to change their mindset.
Great. I think we would all love to show up. Thank you, Armand, and thank you for that comment of taking action and bringing it out to the broader world. I think that's key, and tackling these issues both in the Gulf states and we do know about a lot of particularly island nation, coastal nations that are sinking. I think there's a lot we could do. Drew?
Thanks, Deborah. And thanks again for an opportunity to be part of a prestigious panel and also some great thinkers and I'd say kindred spirits. It's a pleasure to meet you all virtually. Hope so we can do that in kind, perhaps in Dubai. That'd be great. But we're going to put our megaphone to this through our media channels, etc. We put on a lot of impressions, actually billions of impressions every year through people that will consume. And we're going to track this and try, if people want to engage. You mentioned AI in terms of plantations and so on. So that's groundbreaking stuff. If that starts to happen with technology to see these beds and so on, I know that we occupy the largest group of underwater citizen scientists, if you will, lay people who take the peak underwater. They would be happy to engage from the mechanical or supportive aspects of it. But if we're going to get to the point where AI comes in and we're able to scale more quickly, that's a beautiful story to share of hope. And try to take this model and just blast it out across the world to other places that are trying to solve the same problem that wouldn't be aware of it otherwise, that may contact our media. So it's megaphone time for us. And it's not a one-off, it's a start of a journey. And we're really excited to be partnering with you to do whatever we can to see this thing through, because it'll be groundbreaking. And I just love that. And I know everybody that I'm affiliated with loves that as well. So thank you for,
thank you.
thanks for starting it. You've started a movement here, you guys.
Thank you, Drew. Thank you. Well, for me, I just want to say thank you all for showing up. I am inspired by everybody here. I'm a positive person. I like to get out and do things, and I feel like I'm surrounded by kindred spirits who think about these things, but don't want to just talk about them, want to wake up and go, okay, now what? Now what do we do? And I think we're there. This is a call to action. The fact that we have people from now 21 time zones around the world, and there's only 24, listening in, participating in this, shows me, and I think shows all of us, how much interest there is and how much caring there is for the ocean and what we want to do. So everybody out there, this is a call for action. You've heard that you can play a role, from citizen scientist to coral reef restoration to advocate, holding us accountable, being out there, being part of this movement. Please do join us. If you want any more information on this, please contact me or Jake. Jake Collins is my assistant. info@deborahbrosnan.com, and he can send you out any more information on how you can get engaged. That's info@deborahbrosnan.com. This has been a wonderful panel. I want to thank particularly the Global Citizen Forum, who've hosted this with us, for the great work that they've been doing and for the opportunity to partner with them on this. And at this point, I'm going to hand it over to Armand to close out our meeting.
Thank you, everybody. I will be very short. Again, you're doing an amazing job with everybody else, and we're very happy to share this podium from the salons of Paul Mitchell to the underwater global citizens of PADI. We'll offer our Global Citizen magazine, always an edition or a section about your project, and see the evolution, because as you know, the image and the videos are always 1,000 words. So anything in terms of press and media, from the UN to the World Economic Forum, where we have exposure, we'll be happy to provide with visibility to this important topic. And as I mentioned, I think the world is looking for in-person events, and nothing more powerful than in-person meeting where you can convince other important and influential people to take action. So we will be very happy to provide all invitation for all the guests who are listening to, and of course this team panel, to meet in the next 6 months, and hopefully a better world than it is today. But thanks to you, it will be even better for the next generation. So thank you again for your time, dedication, passion, and government as well as financial support.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Stay well, stay safe, and for the oceans.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.